Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another deep dive into the lives of the infamous?
Always.
Today, we're wading into the fascinating world of Sophie Turner.
Oh, this will be good.
For those who might not recognize the name immediately, she first skyrocketed to fame as Sansa Stark in Game of Thrones.
Right. And she's done a few other things since then, too.
She has, like some of the X-Men movies and more recently the ITV crime drama Joan.
So the question we're grappling with today is she a brilliant actress who strategically navigated the tricky terrain of Hollywood?
Or is there something, well, a little more calculated going on? Is she more of a, dare I say, a grifter?
Ooh, I like where this is going.
Let's dive in. And where better to start than with her early career because, she landed that Game of Thrones role at just 13 years old.
13. Can you imagine the pressure? Global fame before you've even finished high school.
I mean, I was barely figuring out how to use a curling iron at 13, let alone handle the scrutiny of the entire world.
Right. And her character, Sansa Stark, went through some incredibly intense stuff. Think about it. Abusive relationships.
Ooh, with Joffrey and then Ramsay Bolton.
Yeah, exactly. And then that incredibly controversial scene.
About the,
Yeah. Those were some heavy, heavy storylines for anyone to take on, let alone a teenager.
And Turner has spoken about how those scenes potentially affected her long term, revealing that she didn't really fully understand the gravity of it all at the time.
Makes you think, right? I mean, she literally had to develop coping mechanisms on set.
Like what?
Well, she said she'd make a point of being silly and having fun between takes.
So as not to get, sucked into the darkness?
Right.
That's actually really smart.
It is, but it also makes you wonder how much of that trauma, even if it's fictional, stays with you.
And then there's how the public reacted to that particular scene we were talking about.
You mean the rape scene?
Yes. And it's important to acknowledge that there was a huge outcry. A lot of people were deeply disturbed.
Rightfully so.
But Turner actually pushed back on some of the criticism, saying people were focused on the on-screen assault while ignoring the real-life instances happening every day.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
She was basically saying, this was a fictional character, I got to walk away from it. Let's use this dialogue to help people who are going through that in their everyday lives.
Powerful statement for sure.
It was. So we've got this young actress thrust into the spotlight, dealing with some very adult themes, and the ensuing public reaction.
And the question is, how did all of this shape her?
Right, because when you look at her career after Game of Thrones, it's been, well, interesting, to say the least.
She hasn't exactly disappeared.
Not at all. X-Men, Apocalypse, Dark Phoenix, Barely Lethal, Time Freak, Heavy. She's worked steadily.
But has she had that same mega success, that Game of Thrones level fame?
That's the thing. She hasn't. So is that deliberate? Is this all part of some master plan?
Maybe she's trying to avoid the pitfalls of being a one-hit wonder,
Interesting. And it gets even more complicated when we factor in some of the, shall we say, controversies.
Like that whole incident in 2017 with the Instagram video?
The one where fans were debating whether or not she used a racial slur.
Yep, that one. It was a whole mess. She said one thing, some fans heard another, and the internet, well,
exploded, basically.
pretty much. There were some who were quick to defend her, pulling up slowed-down versions of the video and claiming she said something different entirely.
Yeah, really digging into the audio and trying to decipher it.
And then there were others who were like, nope, I heard it. This is unacceptable.
A classic he said, she said situation, amplified by the echo chamber of social media.
Right, and it definitely left a mark on her public image. Whether she actually said it or not, the incident became part of her story.
And then there's that whole Instagram photo dump where her caption about the British show Sex and Suspicious Parents got some American fans all riled up.
Ah, the perils of cultural differences. What's considered cheeky banter in one country can be, well, deeply offensive in another.
It definitely showed how every little thing a celebrity does, every word, every joke, can be taken out of context and blown out of proportion.
Especially in the age of social media, where everything is dissected and debated ad nauseum.
Speaking of things being dissected and debated, we can't ignore the elephant in the room. Her divorce from Joe Jonas.
That was a doozy. They were the picture-perfect couple, or so we thought.
Right. 2 kids, seemingly happy, and then bam, Jonas files for divorce in 2023.
And the tabloids went into overdrive.
It was a feeding frenzy. Allegations about Turner partying too much, neglecting her mom duties.
A lot of it coming from unnamed sources, of course, probably from Jonas's camp.
And Turner, She claimed she was blindsided by the whole thing.
saying the kids were the real victims in all of this.
And then there was the whole legal battle over custody. Turner filed suit to have their daughters returned to England, claiming Jonas had taken them without her consent.
It was a whole international custody battle, playing out in both the U.S. and the U.K.
Eventually, they reached an agreement, with the girls splitting time between both parents, but...
It definitely got messy. And then there was that unexpected twist.
What, the part where Taylor Swift offered Turner a place to stay?
Yes. Talk about a plot twist.
It was a pretty wild story from start to finish.
And it definitely adds another layer of complexity to Sophie Turner's life.
So as we dig deeper into her story, the question remains, is she a master manipulator? Or is she just a young woman trying to find her way in a world that's constantly watching, judging, and waiting for her to slip up?
It's a question worth exploring.
It is. And we'll do just that after a quick word from our sponsors.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, how does someone deal with that kind of pressure?
I mean, not just the divorce, but everything, right?
Yeah, the constant spotlight, you're right, from such a young age.
She's talked about that, actually, about how she felt tortured by people commenting on her looks, especially when she was younger.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that. It's heartbreaking, really.
It is. This pressure on young stars to look a certain way.
Like their bodies become public property, you know?
Yeah, and it can have serious consequences. Eating disorders, body dysmorphia.
All sorts of mental health issues. It makes you wonder, you know, does that constant scrutiny, that pressure to be perfect,
contribute to some of the maybe unpredictable or even controversial stuff we see?
like with Sophie? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, imagine growing up like that. The whole world watching your every move, judging you.
Dissecting your relationships.
It's bound to mess with your head. And then you add in the emotional weight of those Game of Thrones storylines.
Right, playing a character who goes through such intense trauma.
It must have been tough. I mean, even if you have coping mechanisms, like she did.
Trying to keep things light on set.
Yeah. Those experiences can still seep in, you know?
Totally. And then there's the public reaction. Like, with that...
The rape scene.
Right. It's understandable that people were upset.
Oh, definitely. But I think Turner had a point when she said that a lot of the outrage seemed, I don't know, maybe out of proportion to how we deal with sexual assault in real life.
Yeah, she was basically saying that she, as an actress, could walk away from that scene, but so many real-life victims don't have that luxury.
It's like their suffering is invisible.
Exactly. And I think that kind of ties into this whole question of, you know, grifter or gifted.
How so?
Well, because she's not afraid to speak her mind, even if it means pissing people off.
Oh, yeah, like with that whole N-word controversy.
All right. Whether you agree with her or not, you have to admit she's not just playing the role of the agreeable celebrity.
She's definitely not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
And I think that's interesting. It's like she's actively shaping her own narrative rather than just letting the media dictate who she is.
That takes guts, for sure. So, okay, let's recap. We've got this crazy talented actress, launched into fame super young.
A career with both huge successes and some, let's say, less successful projects.
Public controversies, a very messy, very public divorce.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. So where do we land on this whole grifter versus gifted thing?
Is she a master manipulator pulling all the strings?
Or just a woman trying to figure things out as she goes along?
I don't know. It's tough to say, right?
Yeah, it's not black and white. I think it's more nuanced than that.
Right, because there's so much we don't see.
Exactly. I mean, we see glimpses of her ambition, right?
Oh, yeah.
But also her vulnerability, her struggles with all this fame and attention. And that's what makes her so fascinating.
Because she's complicated.
Exactly.
Maybe the question isn't so much grifter or gifted, but rather
what?
What happens when you combine incredible talent with this insane pressure cooker of celebrity?
Oh, that's good. Because when you're living your life under a microscope, every choice, every mistake, every little thing you do is
Magnified, right.
100 times over. It's got to be exhausting.
Totally. So maybe instead of trying to label her, we should just try to understand her journey.
Yeah, acknowledge that she's still figuring things out. Just like all of us.
The difference being, of course, she's doing it with the whole world watching.
And judging.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what do you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
Empathy, I think.
Oh, I like that.
Empathy for Sophie Turner. Because she's not perfect.
No one is.
Right. She's made mistakes. She's faced challenges. But she's also incredibly resilient.
And she seems to be constantly learning and growing.
Which is honestly all we can ask of anyone, right?
It's true. She really has had a unique career trajectory.
Right. And it makes you wonder, like, is she making these choices on purpose?
Maybe she's drawn to these roles, the ones that challenge expectations.
It's interesting because when I look at her roles, they do seem to have that in common.
I mean, think about Sansa Stark. She started out as this naive young girl, but then she,
Transforms.
yeah, she became this strong, complex woman. And then Jean Grey in X-Men.
Powerful, fierce.
Right. And now this jewel thief in Joan who becomes this criminal mastermind.
There's definitely a theme of rebellion there.
Totally. It's like she's drawn to characters who break the rules, who defy easy categorization.
And I think audiences respond to that.
Yeah.
We love stories about women who take control.
Especially women who don't fit neatly into those traditional boxes.
The ones who say, screw the rules, I'm doing things my way.
Exactly. And maybe that's what Sophie Turner is doing in real life, too.
You mean walking away from that whole Joe Jonas thing?
Yeah, and raising her daughters on her own terms, choosing roles that really showcase her talent.
It's like she's making a statement,
Like, I'm not that girl anymore.
Right. She's not the teenager who got lucky with a big role. She's a woman who's gone through some stuff, come out the other side, and now she's in control.
I love that. It's like she's not playing the game anymore.
She's changing the game.
And that's why she's so interesting. She's unpredictable. She's unapologetically herself.
And she's not afraid to take risks. So I guess after all this, the question remains. Grifter. Gifted.
Is she playing us all, or is she the real deal?
It's hard to say for sure.
It is, but maybe it's not in either situation.
Maybe it's both.
Possibly. Because let's be real, you don't get to where she is without some level of, change.
Savviness.
Yeah, that's the word. You have to know how to work the system, but at the same time, you need more than that.
You need the talent, the passion,
The drive.
and that certain something, that it factor that you can't really fake.
And maybe Sophie Turner has that. Maybe she's figured out how to balance the ambition and the artistry.
And in a world where image is everything, that's a pretty amazing feat.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Sophie Turner,
What's the takeaway?
pay attention, because she's just getting started.
And who knows what she'll do next.
That's the exciting part. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.